Are you ready to learn the shocking truth about survival in conditions that modern science officially deems completely incompatible with life? If you love incredible stories about the limits of human endurance, then you've come to the right place. Before we begin this spine-chilling journey, give us a big thumbs up right now and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Here, we share the most astonishing historical facts every week. When we hear the word Arizona, we're used to picturing the scorching sun and endless sands. But the state's rugged, wild mountains hide a grim multitude of secrets about how people of the past overcame the most brutal and deadly manifestations of the weather. In these unforgiving lands, an icy, bone-chilling downpour often gives way, without warning, to a sudden drop in temperature, to extreme sub-zero levels, turning everything around into a vast ice rink. It was in just such a nightmarish, hopeless situation that two travelers found themselves completely stranded on a barren, rocky plateau during a terrible storm. They had no modern technology, no high-tech clothing, and not the slightest hope of any external source of warmth to save them. Don't switch channels under any circumstances. Watch this video all the way to the end. The ending will simply shock you. In the final part of the video, I'll explain in minute detail how they managed to survive that endless, freezing night at -20 degrees without any fire at all, and what ingenious trick they used to do it. Bundle up, make some hot tea. Let's get started. What if I told you that everything you believed about winter survival is a lie? Wet cold affects the human body twice as aggressively as the usual dry frost. Clothing rapidly loses its protective function under the continuous flow of icy water from the sky. Two travelers on a mountain plateau realized the gravity of their situation. With no way to build a life-saving fire, they methodically began preparing for the longest night, drawing on the knowledge of their ancient ancestors. Heavy clouds completely obscured the moon and stars above the rocky gorge even before dusk fell. The wind carried large drops of icy rain which pounded the rocky ground with force. The travelers moved confidently along the sheer cliff face in search of a suitable natural hollow. Their steps were firm and measured, despite the intensifying storm around them. Remaining calm was the golden rule in such extreme weather conditions. The rock niche they found could not fully protect them from the slanting, icy rain. However, the stone overhang reliably blocked the strongest gusts of the piercing mountain wind. The men quickly scanned the small space for sharp rocks and large debris. They moved massive boulders to the edge of the niche to create an additional barrier. This simple barricade became the first line of defense against the approaching snowstorm. The air temperature continued to plummet with every minute they spent on the plateau. Raindrops began to turn into fine, sharp ice pellets. The water on the rocks froze, forming a slippery and incredibly cold crust of ice. The travelers sat down on the ground, crossing their legs and pressing their backs tightly against the rock. They prepared to face the onslaught of the elements in a state of complete and conscious stillness. The human body reacts to sudden cooling by constricting the blood vessels on the skin's surface. Blood drains from the extremities to conserve heat for the most vital internal organs. The indigenous people understood this physiological process perfectly and made no attempt to resist it. They relaxed the muscles in their arms and legs, allowing their bodies to regulate internal heat exchange on their own. Their outward calm helped slow their heart rates and significantly reduce the expenditure of precious energy. The enemy's scouts in the valley had surely taken shelter in warm tents by large campfires. No one could have imagined that people would willingly remain on the windswept plateau. The absence of smoke and light made our heroes completely invisible in the night. This camouflage was vital for the successful completion of their expedition. The safety of the entire tribe was worth enduring this unbearably cold night. Ancient survival methods proved their effectiveness even in such inhuman conditions. The human body harbors enormous reserves of resilience when approached correctly. Knowledge of the nature of cold helped the travelers avoid critical hypothermia. It would be very interesting to hear your perspective on such extreme tests of willpower. Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. I'll reveal the best-kept secret of proper layered clothing for extreme conditions. The secret lay in using thick suede made from the hides of large plains animals. This material underwent a special treatment with wood smoke to give it water-repellent properties. Water simply rolled off the surface of the shirt without penetrating the fibers at all. Hunters always wore several loose layers of such clothing during the harsh winter months. The first layer of clothing fits snugly against the body, absorbing the skin's natural moisture. This inner layer always remained soft and maintained a comfortable temperature for the wearer. The second layer served as the primary insulation, reliably trapping air between the fabric fibers. Air is the best natural insulator, provided it remains completely still. The loose fit allowed air to circulate freely around the warm human torso. The outer cloak bore the full brunt of the approaching ice storm. It quickly became wet on the outside, grew heavy, and was covered with a crust of transparent ice. However, this external moisture could not penetrate the barrier of the inner dry layer. The heat of the human body created constant pressure, pushing the icy cold outward. This physical process worked flawlessly throughout the frosty night. The men in the stone niche periodically checked the condition of their multi-layered natural armor. They carefully brushed excess snow from their knees and shoulders with minimal, smooth movements. Keeping the inner layer dry was the top priority in battling the inclement weather. Even a small damp spot on the inner layer could lead to a loss of energy. Therefore, they carefully ensured that their high collars and long sleeves were tightly sealed. Wide leather belts securely fastened the layered clothing at the waist. This completely prevented cold wind from blowing under the long hems of the warm shirts. On their feet, they wore high, sturdy moccasins with durable double soles. A thick layer of dry grass was placed inside the shoes in advance for additional insulation. The grass absorbed moisture and protected the feet from contact with the frozen ground. The travelers' hands were securely tucked deep beneath the folds of warm leather clothing. They pressed their hands against their chests, where body temperature remained highest. Their wrists were tightly wrapped in strips of soft fabric to protect the large blood vessels. It is through the exposed wrists that the human body rapidly loses a significant portion of its internal heat. The trackers knew the anatomy well and skillfully protected the most vulnerable parts of their bodies. The know-how for creating such reliable gear was passed down from senior craftsmen to young hunters. Every item in their natural wardrobe served a strictly defined function in their survival system. Knowledge of the right materials saved lives in the most desperate climatic conditions. Do you think you could remain calm in such a harsh and cold situation? In the next chapter, you'll learn about the unique breathing system that helped them replace the warmth of a campfire. The secret that people pay thousands for lies in a unique breathing control technique. Cold mountain air entering the lungs instantly cools the human body from the inside. An inexperienced traveler in the cold begins to breathe rapidly and deeply, accelerating the process of freezing. The inhabitants of the plains used a fundamentally different approach to the vital process of oxygen intake. They breathed extremely slowly, fully controlling every inhalation and every exhalation. Air was drawn in exclusively through the nose in very small, even portions. The long nasal passages had time to warm the icy stream to a temperature acceptable to the body. This slow process reliably prevented thermal shock to the delicate tissues of the human lungs. The chest expanded minimally during inhalation so as not to deform the upper protective layer of clothing. All mental concentration was directed toward internal sensations in the chest area. A calm inhalation was always followed by a short pause, during which the oxygen was absorbed into the blood. This controlled breath hold allowed the body to derive maximum benefit from the cold air. Exhalation was also performed slowly through tightly pursed and slightly stretched lips. The resistance of the lips created a small but important internal pressure in the airways. This pressure helped distribute the heat evenly throughout the entire body. Such a conscious breathing system required serious practice and the highest level of concentration. Under severe stress, a person instinctively switches to rapid, shallow breathing. The trackers had to consciously suppress this ancient instinct, which was deadly in the cold. They entered a unique state, listening only to the steady rhythm of their hearts. The measured heartbeats served as the main indicator that they were performing the actions correctly. The warm exhaled air flowed smoothly into the spacious leather hood. It did not escape into the open air, but remained near the face and frozen neck. This warm mist created an additional buffer zone between the exposed skin and the cold. Gradually, a comfortable and stable temperature for breathing settled inside the deep hood. The person's face was nestled in a secure and warming pocket of warm air. The thick, icy crust on their clothing had grown even harder by the middle of the long night. Outside, a full-blown snowstorm was raging, driven by an incredibly gusty north wind. Inside, however, beneath the thick layers of leather, the quiet and imperceptible work of the lungs continued. This work generated exactly as much energy as was needed to sustain life. The balance between the brutal cold and the human body was maintained only through iron discipline. The ability to fully control one's body has saved more than one life on this continent. Breathing became not just a physiological process, but a true, subtle tool for survival. It successfully replaced fire, a sturdy shelter, and a warm stove in critical situations. Humans are capable of incredible feats if they know how to listen to their own bodies. If you're interested in this unusual method of staying warm, be sure to like this video. What if everything you were taught is obsolete when faced with real bad weather? Wet and cold rocky ground drains energy several times faster than freezing air. Contact between the body and frozen ground leads to rapid hypothermia of all internal organs. Our travelers anticipated this hidden danger when choosing their shelter in the rocks. They carefully prepared the surface where they would spend many long hours. In their small stone niche, the floor consisted of uneven and very sharp pieces of rock. Sitting directly on them was not only unbearably cold, but also extremely uncomfortable. The discomfort from the sharp edges would have forced them to constantly change positions and waste precious energy. So the men quickly gathered dry tree bark and fallen pine needles around their shelter. This natural material lay deep beneath large boulders and remained completely dry. They spread the collected bark evenly across the rocky floor of their small shelter. Tree bark has excellent thermal insulation properties thanks to its porous structure. On top, they laid a thick layer of soft pine needles for added comfort. This improvised natural carpet reliably insulated their bodies from the frozen rock. The cold of the ground could no longer penetrate directly to their feet and weary backs. Creating this life-saving cushion took only a few minutes right before the storm hit. However, those brief minutes proved to be the deciding factor in their successful survival through the night. The lack of proper insulation from below would inevitably have led to muscle spasms and severe shivering. Shivering is a natural defense mechanism, but it burns precious calories at an alarming rate. The bedding of dry bark and pine needles allowed them to avoid this debilitating physiological process. In addition, the soft forest surface allowed them to fully relax the muscles of their backs and thighs. Relaxed muscles do not impede free blood circulation in the lower limbs at all. Warm blood flowed evenly to their feet, warming them from the inside throughout the inclement weather. The men sat huddled close together to minimize heat loss. The ground beneath them gradually warmed up, creating a small but stable warm zone. Moisture from the heavy freezing rain continued to run actively down the edges of their rocky shelter. The carefully chosen slope of the stone floor directed this water away from the floor. The bark remained dry, continuing to effectively perform its protective and insulating functions. This demonstrated a deep, practical understanding of the laws of physics and the properties of common natural materials. People knew how to see the hidden life-saving potential in the simplest and most ordinary things. They did not build complex permanent shelters, preferring to make use of the natural features of the mountain landscape. The wilderness itself provided all the necessary basic tools for protection against the elements. All that was needed was to correctly combine these disparate elements into a unified safety system. Pine needles, bark, and surrounding rocks became their main armor against the raging icy elements. This complete harmony with the environment made them invulnerable to weather anomalies. The ability to quickly and skillfully set up a dry place to sit was a basic skill of the tracker. This important skill was constantly honed during numerous and difficult forest expeditions. This practically priceless knowledge was passed down from generation to generation as the greatest treasure of the people. Have you ever spent the night in a dark forest without a warm, modern sleeping bag? In the next chapter, you'll learn how they coped with this terrible weather. The concept of a thermal cocoon is absolutely key to the science of survival without external heat sources. It is a closed space around a person in which an individual microclimate is constantly maintained. The air inside such a cocoon is warmed by the skin and does not mix at all with the cold air currents from outside. The two travelers in the rocky niche had skillfully created such a cocoon from their loose-fitting clothing. They curled up into compact positions, reducing the total surface area of their bodies to a minimum. Their heads, arms, and tired legs were securely tucked inside the deep folds of their thick sheepskin coats. Only a small opening remained in the hood to draw in fresh, cold air. This small opening was adjusted by the edges of the thick fabric, depending on the direction of the mountain wind. The stronger the wind blew, the tighter the edges of the thick, warm leather hood closed. In this way, they controlled the flow of oxygen and the loss of their precious internal heat. Creating a thermal cocoon requires complete and conscious stillness to preserve the heated layer of air. Any sudden movement acts like an invisible pump, drawing heat out and pumping in the bitter cold. The men froze, visually transforming into two dark, motionless stones against the backdrop of the grey cliff. Their muscles were completely relaxed, and their breathing remained steady and almost imperceptible to an outside observer. Inside their thick garments, they found themselves in a zone of relative thermal comfort and tranquility. The thick, heavy leather of their shirts kept out the biting wind, acting as the reliable walls of a cocoon. The suede texture of the natural material trapped tiny flying particles of snow and ice. These particles gradually merged into a single icy shell, which served as additional external insulation. The thicker this shell became, the warmer it grew inside the protective leather dome. Wild nature itself actively helped them fortify their small but reliable personal shelter. It takes some time for a warm microclimate to form after assuming the correct static posture. At first, a person may experience a slight chill due to the sudden temperature drop. However, soon the space beneath the thick clothing fills with warmth and the chill disappears without a trace. The Indians knew how to patiently and calmly wait out this transitional period without panic or unnecessary movements. They knew for certain that their trained bodies would certainly cope with this natural physiological task. The thermal cocoon works more effectively the less empty space remains inside, under the clothing. Therefore, long shirts were tied with belts so that the fabric fits snugly around the bent knees. The arms were crossed tightly across the chest, filling all the gaps between the torso and the top layer of fabric. Every cubic centimeter of air inside the cocoon was methodically warmed by the heat of human blood and breath. It was an ideal energy-saving system, tested over centuries of harsh life in the wild. An important element of creating the cocoon was protecting all joints from direct exposure to low temperatures. Knees and elbows are prone to very rapid hypothermia due to the thin layer of fat in these areas. The men wrapped their joints with extra pieces of soft fabric before assuming the proper position. This simple measure prevented dangerous inflammation and allowed them to retain mobility in their limbs by morning. Healthy and flexible joints were vital for the long trek home on foot. Sitting back to back, the men combined their individual warm cocoons into a single shared one. The point of their physical contact became a zone of double warmth, completely immune to external cooling. They constantly shared their energy, increasing their collective chances of surviving the snowstorm. Such interaction required complete trust and an understanding of their companions' hidden bodily rhythms. They breathed in strict unison, creating a single pulsation of life within the dark stone niche. Moisture evaporating from the surface of their heated skin was also trapped inside the thermal cocoon. This moisture humidified the warm air, preventing the airways and mucous membranes from drying out. Dry, frosty air often causes coughing, which is absolutely unacceptable during covert movement. The humid microclimate beneath their thick clothing ensured comfortable breathing for many long hours. The system functioned flawlessly despite the icy and merciless natural hell raging outside. The long hours of nighttime darkness tested the strength of their cocoon with piercing gusts of cold wind. The temperature dropped to sub-zero lows, turning the puddles on the rocks into solid, monolithic ice. But inside the heavy leather garments, life persisted, sustained by ancient knowledge and endurance. Two people successfully withstood the mountain's fury, relying solely on the resources of their own trained bodies. They vividly demonstrated that proper organization of space saves better than any warm fire. I discovered this by chance while studying old records on the properties of natural materials. The outer protective clothing of the Pathfinders was made from carefully selected and properly tanned thick hides. The dense undercoat was created by nature itself to help animals survive the harshest frosts. These hairs had a unique hollow structure inside, making them ideal insulators. People wisely used this gift of nature to protect their lives from the icy, biting wind. The skins were worn with the thick fur facing inward, so that the soft undercoat came into direct contact with the innermost layer of clothing. The fine hairs effectively trapped a vast volume of still air, creating an impenetrable barrier against the bitter cold. The leather base of the pelt was on the outside, blocking wind and heavy precipitation with its dense structure. This natural design worked on the principle of a modern high-tech thermos to maintain temperature. Nature invented this complex technology millions of years before the advent of industrial textile mills. The hides were tanned using a special ancient technique involving natural fats and oils. This lengthy process made the material incredibly soft, elastic, and completely water-resistant. Ice-cold water simply rolled off the oiled surface, failing to penetrate the fiber structure at all. Even in pouring cold rain, such a cloak remained dry on the inside for hours on end. This was critically important for retaining body heat in wet and windy climates. Two travelers in a rocky niche were tightly wrapped in wide capes made of thick winter fur. These massive capes covered their bodies from head to toe, forming a reliable protective dome. Inside the warm dome, the fur gently brushed their shoulders and backs, warming them with warm, still air. The wind tugged futilely at the edges of the capes, unable to penetrate the thick undercoat. The people were completely isolated and safe inside their soft, warm fur shelter. Fur possesses another unique ability. It wicks excess moisture away from the human body. This reliably prevents the formation of condensation inside the clothing, which inevitably leads to rapid hypothermia. Sweat passes smoothly through the fur and settles on the inner side of the cape's smooth leather base. There, it simply freezes into a thin layer of frost, causing absolutely no harm to the warm microclimate. Hunters were well aware of this physical property and regularly shook the frost out of their thick capes. The weight of such multi-layered clothing was considerable, but this was fully offset by its phenomenal durability. The thick capes served simultaneously as a blanket, a raincoat, and even a tent during long treks. They never tore on rocks or thorns, reliably protecting the body from any mechanical damage. The Native Americans treated their belongings with great care, constantly maintaining them in impeccable working condition. Proper and regular maintenance ensured that the clothing would surely save a life at the most critical moment. Using only natural materials allowed the Native Americans to live in harmony with the continent's harsh conditions. They did not conquer the surrounding nature, but constantly learned from it, adopting the most effective defense mechanisms. Thick, warm fur became their main ally in the fight against the biting cold of the night wind. Knowledge of the properties of materials was carefully passed down by word of mouth over many long generations. This practical wisdom was the foundation of their culture and the main guarantee of the tribe's prosperity. The experience of past centuries convincingly proves that natural materials often surpass many artificial alternatives. A properly and skillfully tanned hide can save a person in conditions where modern fabric is completely powerless. Did you know about these unusual properties of natural materials in extreme sub-zero temperatures? In the next chapter, you'll learn how they coped with this dreadful weather. Maintaining a high body temperature in conditions of severe frost requires a colossal expenditure of internal energy. This energy is drawn exclusively from the human body's own stored calorie reserves. Native Americans fully understood the incredible importance of proper and nutritious food before long winter treks. They used special concentrated foods that provided a long-lasting feeling of fullness and a powerful surge of energy. The most important of these foods was the famous pemmican, consisting of dried meat, fat, and wild berries. Fat is the most important and energy-dense component in the diet of any endurance hunter or tracker. When heavy fats are broken down, the body releases a huge amount of pure and essential metabolic heat. This heat is quickly carried by the blood throughout the body, effectively warming the limbs and internal organs. Pemmican was the ideal dense fuel for the body's internal biological furnace, operating completely without smoke or firewood. A small piece of this food could sustain an adult's strength throughout an entire freezing day. Our heroes in the stone niche had prudently eaten their portions of pemmican before the snowstorm began. The process of slow digestion instantly triggered a mechanism for the continuous production of internal heat in their stomachs. Blood circulated actively in the abdominal cavity, carrying nutrients and heat throughout their frozen bodies. This hidden process worked like a slowly smoldering hot coal, warming their cocoon from the inside. Proper high-calorie nutrition became another important factor in their successful survival through the night. During the storm, the consumption of any cold food or water was strictly and categorically forbidden. Cold water instantly lowers the core body temperature, causing severe, uncontrollable shivering and spasms. The travelers quenched their intense thirst only with small pieces of pure, perfectly smooth ice. They placed the ice in their mouths and let it melt very slowly, allowing the water to warm up before swallowing. This method prevented dangerous thermal shock and provided the exhausted body with the necessary life-saving moisture. The energy derived from food was distributed by the body with mathematical precision and incredible efficiency. At rest, the body expended precious calories only to maintain the basic functions of the heart and lungs. The muscles were in a completely relaxed state, requiring absolutely no additional supply of nutrients. Such internal optimization allowed them to stretch their energy reserves over many hours of an icy mountain storm. The men controlled this complex process through sheer willpower and maximum concentration. In modern extreme survival practices, a high-calorie diet also plays a primary and crucial role. Without sufficient fats and carbohydrates, any warm clothing becomes utterly useless fabric. The body simply stops producing heat, and a person slowly freezes to death, even in the finest down jacket. The experience of indigenous peoples fully confirms this basic physiological law of human energy conservation. Food is the necessary fuel for the internal furnace, without which life in the cold is simply impossible. The pemmican recipe was refined over many centuries to achieve the perfect balance of nutrients and beneficial substances. Dried meat provided pure protein to restore strength and maintain necessary muscle tone. Fat provided long-lasting, powerful energy and intense warmth for the entire body during the harshest cold. Berries added essential vitamins and a pleasant flavor to this versatile and simple camping ration. The inner fire, sustained by hearty, fatty food, burned steadily and consistently until the saving dawn. The human body clearly demonstrated its ability to generate enough heat to survive an ice storm. The men survived the coldest hours of the long night without any signs of dangerous hypothermia. Their practical knowledge of physiology and nutrition far surpassed many of the achievements of medical science at the time. It was an absolute triumph of millennia of experience over the blind fury of the raging winter elements. Maintaining absolute calm in a critical situation is the key to successfully overcoming any difficulty. Panic instantly causes a rapid heartbeat, erratic, shallow breathing, and a very rapid loss of body heat. Under severe stress, the brain consumes a huge amount of energy, rapidly depleting the body's reserve resources. Native Americans trained their minds from early childhood, cultivating an iron will and incredible composure. They were able to fully control their emotions, even in the face of imminent and terrifying danger. The two travelers in the rock niche remained in a state of deep inner mental concentration at all times. They absolutely refused to let the fear of the cold take hold of their minds and subjugate their exhausted bodies. Primitive fear paralyzes the will and compels a person to commit utterly illogical and extremely dangerous acts. Instead, they focused on the monotonous sound of heavy, icy drops falling onto the rocks. This unique form of auditory meditation helped them distract themselves from physical discomfort and slow down the subjective passage of time. In their minds, they constantly imagined the warm summer sun and the scorching hot sand of the desert. The power of the human imagination is capable of directly influencing many physiological processes in the human body. Visualizing warmth actually helps dilate blood vessels and significantly improve blood circulation in the limbs. This technique is widely used in modern sports psychology to relieve stress and muscle tension. The trackers used it completely intuitively, relying solely on their rich, practical life experience. They also actively employed the method of isometric muscle tension to generate additional life-saving heat. This method involves alternately tensing and then relaxing various large muscle groups in the body. At the same time, no visible movements are made at all, which allows for the perfect preservation of the thermal cocoon. The imperceptible muscle tension stimulates blood flow and causes the body to release metabolic heat energy. This is an excellent and safe alternative to uncontrolled shivering, which exhausts the body and burns extra calories. The men smoothly and rhythmically tense the muscles of their thighs, abs, and back in time with their steady breathing. These subtle internal exercises helped them stay toned and prevented their bodies from becoming stiff. They worked like a well-oiled machine, carefully balancing periods of muscular exertion with periods of complete rest. Control over the body was achieved through constant and deep monitoring of their own internal sensations. They felt every muscle contraction and mentally directed the heat generated to the coldest areas. The ability to silently endure any hardship was elevated to the rank of the highest virtue in the culture of the Plains tribes. The men took justifiable pride in their endurance and their ability to bear any weather anomalies without complaint. Their discipline was absolutely unquestionable, allowing for no leniency or moments of weakness. Every action was strictly subordinated to a single goal, preserving internal warmth and maintaining stealth. They did not allow themselves to relax for even a second until the raging storm had completely subsided. Such strict self-discipline always distinguishes true professional trackers from ordinary, unprepared people. It is this very skill that saves lives where others give up and inevitably perish. The human mind ultimately triumphed over the cold, thanks to centuries-old traditions and proper mental preparation. The body obeyed the brain's silent commands without question, operating at the very limits of its physical and biological capabilities. These two men became the most vivid example of the triumph of the human spirit over the blind forces of nature. Their unique experience proves that the limits of our capabilities lie solely within our own minds. A strong will is always the most reliable and sturdy shield against any harsh adversity in life. Survival in extreme conditions is extremely rarely truly successful in complete solitude. Having an experienced and reliable partner doubles the chances of a successful outcome in even the most dangerous ordeal. Mutual aid and perfect coordination of actions always become critically important factors on the path to salvation. The two travelers in the niche demonstrated a simply perfect example of teamwork in the raging icy hell. They functioned as a single, coordinated organism, constantly supporting and protecting one another. Their primary joint method of staying warm was the complete physical merging of their individual thermal cocoons. Sitting tightly back to back, they minimized the surface area through which their bodies lost heat to the hostile environment. Backs are very large surfaces that actively radiate a great deal of precious heat. Pressed close together, they created a shared protected zone with a high and very stable temperature. The heat from one person flowed smoothly to the other, warming their shared circulatory system. This comfortable position also provided excellent mutual support for their severely fatigued back muscles. They could relax their spines slightly, leaning on the firm, warm shoulder of their trusted companion. Relaxing the deep muscles conserved energy and prevented painful spasms from sitting for so long. They seemed to merge and transform into a monolithic structure, completely resistant to any gusts of wind. This monolithic unity helped them maintain strict immobility throughout the long hours of the snowstorm. The trackers regularly and very smoothly shifted their points of contact to prevent their frozen limbs from going numb. These subtle movements were microscopic and fluid, so as not to break the icy shell of their warm clothing. They shifted their shoulders slightly and slowly transferred their weight from one side to the other. The synchrony of these actions was simply astonishing. As one moved forward, the other instantly took the vacated space. They communicated entirely without words, using only the language of light touches and the pressure of their bodies. The partners watched each other's breathing very closely in the pitch-black night. If one's breathing suddenly became ragged, the other would press his back a little harder to transfer warmth. It was a silent signal of support, clearly conveying that help was always nearby. Such a deep psychological bond helped them maintain their composure during the most difficult and freezing moments. The knowledge that you were by no means alone gave them new strength to continue fighting the cold. Their interaction was by no means limited to physical contact and strict control of their breathing. They also took turns staying awake, allowing their partner to sink into a very light, restorative slumber. Deep sleep was deadly dangerous, as body temperature drops very quickly during sleep. But a brief rest with eyes closed was excellent for restoring the exhausted nervous system. The one on watch closely monitored the situation outside and gently nudged the sleeper at the slightest sign of potential danger. By morning, they looked like a single snowdrift, completely covered by a thick crust of ice. But deep beneath that snowdrift, two warm and very strong human hearts beat steadily. They had managed to pool their inner resources and unconditionally triumph in an unequal battle against nature. Human interaction proved far stronger than the combined force of the bitter cold and the mountain wind. This is a striking example of how social bonds truly help a species survive. Their unique experience shows that teamwork is the highest form of adaptation to any hardship. Together, well-prepared people are capable of overcoming obstacles that are absolutely insurmountable for an ordinary individual. This law of nature works flawlessly at all times and under absolutely any difficult circumstances. Solidarity and complete mutual trust save lives better than even the warmest and most modern clothing. They met the saving dawn completely alive thanks to their unbreakable inner unity. The most incredibly cold hours always come just before the sun rises on the horizon. The air temperature had reached its absolute minimum, freezing the last remnants of moisture from the heavy clouds. The storm gradually began to subside, giving way to the ringing, frosty silence of a clear mountain morning. Two snow-covered mounds in a rocky niche remained absolutely motionless in the grey pre-dawn mist. Inside these mounds, the people were mentally preparing for the most critical stage of their successful survival. The first rays of the cold sun faintly touched the snow-capped peaks, coloring them a soft pink. The light descended very slowly into the valley, dispelling the thick shadows of the long and dreadful frosty night. The air remained piercingly icy, but the sun's appearance brought a powerful psychological surge of vigor. The people in the shelter clearly felt the change in light, even through their tightly closed eyelids. They understood exactly that their ordeal had been successfully overcome, and they were still very much alive. Then they began to make very gentle circular movements with their hands and feet. These smooth movements circulated the warmed blood to the farthest reaches of their circulatory system. The numbness gradually and irrevocably faded, giving way to a slight tingling and the return of full sensation. The thick, icy armor on their clothing began to crackle softly from these cautious movements. They took their time, giving their bodies time for a gentle and natural physiological adjustment. Shaking off their numbness, the men very carefully stretched their stiff neck muscles and the entire shoulder girdle. They slowly and with pleasure straightened their backs, shaking off chunks of ice that had frozen onto them overnight. Their clothing, beneath the icy protective crust, remained dry and retained a comfortable internal warmth. The bedding of dry pine bark also served its purpose, completely protecting their feet from frostbite. Their well-thought-out survival strategy had worked flawlessly down to the very last detail. The trackers rose to their feet smoothly, carefully checking the stability and mobility of their joints. They exchange brief, silent nods, confirming their full readiness for the long trek ahead. The enemy patrols in the valley had no idea that strangers were on the rocky plateau. The absence of campfire traces allowed them to keep their cover in absolutely perfect condition. They could continue their very important reconnaissance mission unhindered and safely. Before leaving, they very carefully destroyed all traces of their stay in this rocky niche. Pine needles and bark were neatly scattered by the wind so as not to attract unwanted attention. The stones were precisely returned to their original places, as if no one had ever touched them. Nature would very quickly conceal the remaining minor traces under a fresh layer of sparkling falling snow. No one would ever know that a battle between a man and an ice storm had taken place here. They descended silently from the plateau along a narrow animal trail, moving with incredible speed and agility. Their bodies warmed up quickly from the vigorous walking, finally driving away the last remnants of the night's cold. The frosty, clear morning seemed truly beautiful to them after the stormy nightmare they had endured the night before. Every new breath of fresh air filled their lungs with pure and sincere joy for life. They had won a clear victory in a battle where the slightest mistake would have cost them everything. This historical account demonstrates their incredible and profound connection with the surrounding nature. They did not try to blindly fight the elements, but knew how to skillfully adapt to its harsh rhythms. Their knowledge of the laws of physics and the unique properties of materials replaced all modern technology for them. Their experience is an absolutely invaluable treasure trove of knowledge on survival in a wild and dangerous environment. Modern people certainly have much to learn from these outstanding masters of the forest craft. The ability to successfully manage without fire in an icy wilderness is the absolute pinnacle of survival. It always requires iron discipline, perfect equipment, and flawless teamwork. These people have vividly demonstrated that the human body harbors immense reserves of endurance. Their story will forever remain a shining example of incredible courage and unyielding fortitude. This great legacy deserves deep respect and the most careful study by all generations. A story of survival in the Arizona mountains without a single campfire demonstrates the incredible capabilities of the human body. Do you think you could put these ancient breathing and thermoregulation techniques into practice? Be sure to share your thoughts, suggest topics for future videos, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new content.